She fell asleep on the billionaire's shoulder with her resume in hand, and what he did changed her destiny. Before we start the story, leave in the comments what city you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story, everyone. Zoe Hartman was running late. It wasn't the normal kind of late, the kind you can fix with a quick jog and a sheepish smile. It was the catastrophic, apocalyptic kind of late, the kind that makes you question every decision you've made in your life up to that moment. You can do this, Zoe. You always do, even when it doesn't seem like it. She repeated the phrase, looking at her own reflection in the mirror of the tiny bathroom in her Austin apartment. The apartment that, in 12 hours, would no longer be hers. The cardboard boxes were stacked in the living room. The refrigerator was empty. And the overdue electric bill was shoved under a cushion, because Zoe firmly believed that problems you can't see don't exist. You're smart, you're capable, you're going to nail this interview. Her phone rang. It was her mother. Third call in 15 minutes. Zoe answered while trying to put on mascara with her other hand. Hi, Mom. Are you at the airport yet? Almost. Zoe Marie Hartman. Almost is not an answer. It's an approximate answer. She poked her own eye with the mascara and swallowed the pain. Ow. What happened? Nothing. I'm fine. Everything's under control. Do you have a backup plan? Mom? Because Philadelphia is far away. You don't know anyone there. And what if it doesn't work out? What if the company doesn't like you? What if you end up alone in a strange city with no job and no money and… Mom. Zoe took a deep breath. I need to go. I love you. Bye. She hung up before her mother could list 17 more catastrophic scenarios. The problem was that Zoe had already listed all of them herself. At 3 a.m, while packing her things and trying not to cry all over her own clothes. She was 27 years old, a business administration degree that cost a fortune in student loans, 3 years of experience at companies that closed down, downsized, or simply decided that it wasn't the right time. And now, a single interview opportunity at Callahan Air, one of the largest aviation companies in the United States, headquartered in Philadelphia. One chance, a single chance. And she was running late. Zoe grabbed her suitcase, which had a broken zipper and was closed with a makeshift belt, stuffed her printed resume in her purse, and ran out of the apartment without looking back. The taxi she had called didn't show up, because of course it didn't show up. She ran 4 blocks until she managed to get another one. The driver drove as if he were out for a Sunday stroll, stopping at every yellow light like a model citizen. Sir, I'm in a bit of a hurry, Zoe said, trying to stay calm. Haste is the enemy of perfection, miss. Haste is also friends with not missing flights, sir. He didn't speed up. When Zoe finally arrived at the airport, there were 40 minutes until boarding, which should have been enough. Should have been. But the line at the check-in counter was huge, and the system had crashed, and the attendant was looking at the computer screen as if she were trying to decipher Egyptian hieroglyphics. Next, Zoe rushed forward out of breath. Hi. Austin to Philadelphia, Zoe Hartman. The attendant typed, frowned, typed some more. That flight closed 3 minutes ago. The world stopped. What? Boarding has ended. You missed the flight, ma'am. No. No, no, no. Zoe felt the ground disappear. Please, I have an interview. A job interview. The interview of my life. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock Philadelphia. If I don't catch this flight, Her voice failed. The attendant sighed, looked at Zoe. Disheveled hair, eyes that hadn't slept in 2 days, suitcase closed with a belt. Let me see what I can do. 15 minutes of typing, 2 internal calls, and a printer that jammed 3 times later, Zoe had a new ticket. Last available seat on the 2:40 p.m. flight. Connection in Dallas. Gets into Philadelphia at 11 at night. Thank you. Zoe almost hugged the woman over the counter. Thank you so much. You're a saint, a goddess, a celestial being of the aviation system. The attendant blinked, clearly not knowing how to react. Zoe ran to the boarding gate. The next few hours were a blur of airports, endless corridors, dry sandwiches bought at convenience stores, and coffee that tasted like liquid regret. When she finally boarded the last flight, the one that would take her straight to Philadelphia, Zoe was at her limit. 36 hours without really sleeping. A decent meal 2 days ago, her nerves so frayed that anything could make her cry or laugh hysterically. She found her seat, window. Thank heavens. She sat down, buckled her seatbelt, and took her resume out of her purse for another look. Maybe the 15th look of the day, as if the words would magically change if she kept staring at the paper long enough. Zoe Hartman, Human Resources and Organizational Development Specialist. Excellent interpersonal communication skills. She almost laughed. Interpersonal communication? If people only knew that she spent half her time talking to herself. Excuse me. Zoe looked up and temporarily lost the ability to form coherent thoughts. The man standing in the aisle was the kind of person who makes you wonder if you're in a perfume commercial and didn't realize it. Tall, defined jawline, eyes of a cold gray that seemed to analyze everything around with surgical precision. Impeccable suit that probably cost more than everything Zoe owned, including her student loans. That's my seat, he said, pointing to the middle seat. Oh, of course. Sorry. Zoe shrank to the side as he sat down. He moved as if every gesture were calculated, efficient, without wasting energy. It's okay, Zoe. He's just a human being. An absurdly intimidating human being who seems to judge the oxygen you breathe, but still a human being. She went back to looking at her resume, tried to concentrate, but his presence beside her was like a magnetic field of seriousness that distorted everything around. The plane took off. Zoe fought sleep for exactly 20 minutes. Reread her resume. Read it again. The words started to blur. Her eyes felt heavy as if someone had placed bricks on her eyelids. Don't sleep, Zoe. You can't sleep. You need to review. Need to prepare. Need to. Her head tilted to the side. She corrected it. Tilted again. Corrected again. The third time, she didn't correct it. Zoe fell asleep with her resume still in her hand, not realizing that her body, traitorous as it was slowly leaning to the side of the passenger in the suit, onto the shoulder of a complete stranger. Derek Callahan felt the exact moment her head rested on his shoulder. He froze. Derek wasn't the type of man who froze. He had conducted meetings with billionaire investors. He had closed deals that changed the course of entire industries. He had fired senior executives without blinking. But a strange woman sleeping on his shoulder? That wasn't in any procedure manual. He looked to the side slowly, as if any sudden movement might wake her. She was sleeping deeply, her breathing light, her face relaxed in a way that contrasted with the tension he had noticed before. And she was mumbling. Get a job. Prove to everyone I'm not a failure. Derek raised an eyebrow. Mom will see. I'll make it. Just need a chance. Her hand relaxed. The resume slipped in slow motion and fell into the space between the seats. Derek looked at the paper. Looked at her. Looked at the paper again. He shouldn't pick it up. It was an invasion of privacy. It was completely inappropriate. But Derek Callahan wasn't the type of man who left important documents lying on an airplane floor. At least that's what he told himself as he picked up the resume and started reading. Zoe Hartman, Human Resources and Organizational Development Specialist. Interesting. Excellent interpersonal communication skills. Specialist in transforming work environments through authentic human connections. He almost smiled. Almost. The woman who wrote about authentic human connections was currently drooling slightly on a stranger's shoulder while mumbling about not being a failure. There was something there. Something he couldn't define. Derek kept reading. Experience, skills, references, all organized, professional, correct. But it was the handwritten note in the corner of the last page that made him stop. You can do this, Zoe. You always do. Even when it doesn't seem like it. He stared at those words for longer than he should have. An hour and a half passed. The captain announced the beginning of descent into Philadelphia. And that's when Zoe Hartman woke up. Woke up with her face stuck to something that smelled like expensive cologne and questionable decisions. It took exactly 3 seconds for her brain to process the situation. First, she was on a plane. Second, she was drooling. Third, she was drooling on the shoulder of a man who looked like he'd stepped off the cover of a business magazine. Zoe pulled away so fast she almost broke her own neck. "Oh my God," she whispered, wiping the corner of her mouth. "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." The man beside her didn't move, kept looking straight ahead, his jaw tense, his eyes fixed on some invisible point. "Great job, Zoe," she mumbled to herself. "You just drooled on a stranger. First impression, 0, minus infinity. Are you okay? He asked, his voice as neutral as a spreadsheet. Zoe froze. Yes, perfectly fine. Great. The air here is very airy. The air is very airy? Seriously, Zoe? Derek raised an eyebrow. Airy. Yeah. Molecules. Oxygen. Things that exist. That's why it's airy. She was digging her own verbal grave and couldn't stop. Sorry about the shoulder, she said, pointing to the stain. It's not a hobby of mine, drooling on strangers. It only happens when I haven't slept in 36 hours and I'm nervous about an interview that could change my life. Derek blinked. I'm talking too much, aren't I? Yes. Right, I'll stop. She didn't stop. She told him about missing the flight, about the move, about not having a backup plan, about containing tired and poorly fed internal crowds. And then she realized the resume was no longer with her. No. She searched frantically, looked under the seat, in her purse, in the space between the seats. Looking for this? His voice cut through the panic. Zoe turned, and there it was, her resume, in his hands. It fell while you were sleeping, Derek explained. Oh. She reached out her hand. Thank you. You're an angel, an intimidating angel in a suit, but still. Their fingers touched for half a second as she took the paper. Did you read it? Zoe asked, her eyes widening. It was open. On the page with skills. Excellent interpersonal communication skills. Zoe wanted to disappear. Interesting, he continued, his tone neutral, for someone who described the last few minutes as the lowest point of adult life. Was that a joke? His face gave no clue. I contain multitudes, she replied. Sometimes they're tired. The corner of his mouth moved, almost imperceptible. The plane landed. Zoe stood up quickly, bumping her knee on the seat in front. It was a pleasure. It was embarrassing, but thank you, and sorry. I hope I never see you again in my life. She realized what she had just said. That came out wrong. I didn't mean. Good luck with the interview, he interrupted. Zoe stopped talking. For the first time in 10 minutes. Thank you, she whispered. And she ran off that plane, stumbling twice in the aisle, apologizing to a carry-on bag and almost dropping her own passport. Derek remained seated watching her leave. Then he looked at the empty seat beside him. A loose sheet, professional references. It had come detached from the resume without her noticing, and at the top, written by hand in blue pen, You can do this, Zoe. You always do, even when it doesn't seem like it. Derek Callahan tucked the sheet into the inside pocket of his jacket. He couldn't explain why. And for a man who had an explanation for absolutely everything, that was disturbing. Deeply disturbing. Derek Callahan's executive car glided through the streets of Philadelphia while he held a sheet of paper as if it were an alien artifact, a sheet of paper with blue pen handwriting, and a name he couldn't get out of his head. To headquarters. Derek told the driver, his eyes still fixed on the handwritten words. You can do this, Zoe. You always do. He should have returned it, should have gotten her attention on the plane, handed over the sheet, and moved on with his perfectly organized life. It was the correct procedure. The logical thing to do. But Derek hadn't done the logical thing, and that irritated him deeply. He picked up his phone and dialed his assistant. Sandra. Mr. Callahan, how was the flight? I need you to investigate someone. He looked at the resume. Zoe Hartman, business administration degree, human resources specialist. Probably lives in Austin or lived there. Check if she has an interview scheduled at any company in Philadelphia tomorrow. Silence on the other end of the line. Sir? Is there a problem, Sandra? No, it's just that you've never asked me to investigate anyone before, at least not like this, without context. Derek frowned. The context is that I'm asking. Of course. I'll check immediately. He hung up. The driver looked in the rearview mirror but had the wisdom not to comment. Derek put the sheet back in the inside pocket of his jacket, for the third time in 10 minutes, as if he needed to confirm it was still there. This is ridiculous, he thought. You're the president of a billion-dollar company. You don't become obsessed with strangers who drool on your shoulder. But the truth was, he wasn't obsessed with the drool. He was obsessed with the words, even when it doesn't seem like it. Who writes that to themselves? What kind of person needs to remind themselves in handwriting that they're capable? The kind of person who's heard the opposite too many times. Derek knew that type well. He was that type. On the other side of the city, Zoe Hartman was having an existential crisis in a public restroom. Not just any restroom. The restroom in the lobby of the Callahan Air Building, where she had an interview scheduled for 9 o'clock the next morning. She had arrived in the city, found a cheap little hotel near downtown, and decided, in a decision that now seemed monumentally stupid, to go check out the building the night before. To prepare, to get familiar, to pretend she had some control over her own life. "Okay, Zoe," she said to the mirror, fixing her hair that looked like it had fought with a fan. "You're here. You made it. The worst is over." Her reflection didn't look convinced. "Tomorrow you're going to get in that elevator, go up to the human resources floor and nail it. You'll be confident, professional, articulate." She practiced a smile. She looked like someone having a facial spasm. "Less psychopath," she mumbled, adjusting. "More friendly professional." She tried again. Now she looked like an encyclopedia salesperson from the 1950s. "Okay, let's practice the introduction." She straightened her shoulders. "Good morning, my name is Zoe Hartman, and I'm very happy to be here." Too robotic. "Hi, I'm Zoe. Huge pleasure." Too informal. "Hello, Zoe Hartman. Professional. In human resources." Now she sounded like a robot with processing issues. The restroom door opened. A tall, elegant woman with perfectly aligned dark hair and a suit that probably cost twice Zoe's rent walked in and stopped when she saw the scene. Zoe was frozen in a confident professional position, with a crooked smile on her face and her hands extended as if she were about to hug the air. "I was practicing," Zoe said, slowly lowering her hands. The woman raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "Clearly. For an interview, tomorrow, here, in this building." Zoe couldn't stop talking. "Not that I regularly hang out in restrooms practicing. That would be weird. I'm normal. Completely normal." "I'm sure you are," the woman said, her tone icy. She walked to the sink, washed her hands with precise movements, and looked at Zoe through the mirror. "Interview for which department?" "Human resources, organizational development." Something passed through the woman's eyes. Something Zoe couldn't identify. "Interesting." The woman dried her hands. "Good luck then. You'll need it." And she left without looking back. Zoe stood there, her heart racing. Did she say good luck or threatening good luck? She asked the mirror. Because it sounded like a threat. It definitely sounded like a threat. The mirror didn't answer. Great. Even the mirror doesn't support me anymore. Victoria Hale crossed the lobby with calculated steps, her phone already at her ear. "Sandra, it's me. What did Derek ask you to do?" The assistant hesitated on the other end. "Miss Hale, I don't know if—" "Sandra." Victoria stopped near the executive elevator. "I'm the executive director of this company. Everything that happens here goes through me." Silence. "He asked me to investigate a candidate, Zoe Hartman." Victoria felt something tighten in her chest. It wasn't concern, it was survival instinct. Why? He didn't say, just asked for information about her. He seemed interested. Interested. Derek Callahan didn't get interested in people. He got interested in numbers, contracts, profit margins, not in unknown candidates who practiced interviews in restrooms. "I see. Thank you, Sandra." Victoria hung up. The elevator arrived. She got in, alone, and observed her reflection in the mirrored doors. She had worked 10 years to get where she was. 10 years building her position, her influence, her indispensability. Derek depended on her for everything. Decisions, strategies, even to remember to eat during long meetings. She was the pillar, the constant, the only person he really needed. And now he was interested in a stranger. The doors closed. Victoria smiled at her reflection, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Zoe Hartman," she murmured. "Let's see how long you last." At the cheap hotel on the other side of the city, Zoe was lying on the bed, staring at the stained ceiling. "You can do this," she whispered. "You always do." But the voice in her head, the one that always appeared at the worst moments, whispered back, "What if this time you can't?" Zoe closed her eyes. Tomorrow would be the most important day of her life. She just didn't know that the man whose shoulder she had drooled on was the owner of the company where she would be interviewing. And that someone was already planning to make sure she never succeeded. The next morning at 8:47, the elevator stopped on the 41st floor, and Zoe was absolutely certain she was about to faint. She wasn't supposed to be there. The original interview was on the 12th floor, Human Resources Department, with a manager named Patricia. 9 in the morning. Everything organized, everything planned, everything under control. until the receptionist in the lobby called her by name and said the most terrifying words Zoe had ever heard. "Miss Hartman, there's been a change. Mr. Callahan wants to see you personally." 41st floor. Callahan, the owner of the company, the president, the man whose name was in gold letters on the building's facade. Zoe spent the last 45 seconds in the elevator trying not to hyperventilate. "It's okay," she whispered to herself. "Maybe it's protocol. Maybe he does this with all candidates. Maybe." The doors opened, and Zoe saw the most intimidating room of her entire existence. Glass walls, panoramic view of Philadelphia, a mahogany desk that probably cost more than all the furniture she had ever owned in her life combined. And behind that desk, no, the man from the plane, the man from the shoulder, the man she had drooled on less than 24 hours ago was sitting there, looking at her with those gray eyes that seemed to x-ray her soul. "Miss Hartman," he said, "come in." Zoe took a step. Her legs felt like they were made of expired gelatin. "You," she blurted out before she could control herself. Derek raised an eyebrow. "Me? You're Derek Callahan, president of Callahan Air." He indicated the chair in front of the desk. "Sit down. You drooled on the company president. You drooled on the company president." Zoe walked toward the chair, or tried to. Halfway there, her foot got tangled in the rug, a perfectly flat rug because of course it was, and she stumbled forward. The folder she was holding flew, papers scattered through the air like graduation confetti. Resume, recommendation letters, certificates, a receipt from the coffee she had bought earlier, all mixed together in a rain of humiliation. "No," Zoe threw herself on the floor trying to gather everything. No. Derek stood up. "Let me help." "You don't need to. Everything's under control." Clearly it wasn't. Derek crouched down and began collecting the papers with mechanical, precise movements, as if he were organizing a file and not salvaging the mortal remains of Zoe's dignity. "Here," he said, extending a sheet. Zoe took it without looking. "Thank you. That's the menu from the ground floor restaurant." She looked. It really was. "Why do you have a restaurant menu?" "I don't. It was in your folder." Zoe closed her eyes for a second. "I grabbed it by mistake. Last night, when I came to check out the building, I thought it was an informational brochure. About executive lasagna? I didn't read it carefully." Derek picked up another paper. "And this one?" Zoe looked. It was a laundry receipt from Austin. That shouldn't be there either. Interesting organizational system. It's a system based on panic and hope. The corner of Derek's mouth moved, almost imperceptibly. They finished gathering the papers and Zoe finally managed to sit in the chair, hugging the folder like a war shield. "So," Derek returned to his seat. "Miss Hartman." "Zoe, you can call me Zoe. I mean, Miss Hartman works too. Whatever you prefer." I answer to practically anything at this point. "Zoe." He tested the name as if it were a word in another language. "Do you know why you're here?" "Honestly, I have no idea. My interview was on the 12th floor with Patricia. I canceled it. You canceled my interview and rescheduled it with me." Zoe blinked. "Why?" Derek hesitated. It was the first time she had seen him hesitate at anything. "Your resume interested me." "My resume that fell on your shoulder while I was drooling?" "The same one. That's very strange. I agree." Silence. "But here we are," he continued. "Here we are," Zoe repeated, "in a professional meeting based on drool and dropped documents." Derek cleared his throat. "Let's begin. Tell me about your experience." Zoe took a deep breath. Professionalism. It was time for professionalism. "I worked 3 years in organizational development. My specialty is creating connections between teams and improving work environments through effective communication and—" "That's on the resume," Derek interrupted. "Tell me something that isn't." Zoe stopped. "What do you mean? Why do you want this job?" "The truth, not the rehearsed answer." She opened her mouth to give the rehearsed answer. The answer about professional growth and alignment of values and development opportunities. But something in his eyes made her stop. He really wanted to know. "Because I need to," Zoe said, her voice lower. "I have overdue bills, student loans. My last job closed 4 months ago. The one before that cut my entire department." She swallowed. "I'm good at what I do. I know I am. But it seems like no matter how hard I try, things keep falling apart, and I need a chance. A real chance." The office fell silent. Derek observed her for a long moment. You wrote a message to yourself, he said, in the corner of your resume. Zoe felt her face burn. You read that? You can do this, Zoe. You always do. That was private? It was on the document, in a corner, in small handwriting. She sank into the chair. This is very embarrassing. Why? Because normal people don't need to write motivational reminders to themselves. Normal people, Derek said slowly, usually don't get where they want to go. Zoe looked up. He was looking at her differently. Not with judgment, with something that seemed like recognition. You're hired. What? You start Monday. Human resources, organizational development. Sandra will go over the details. Wait, just like that? No more questions? You answered the only one that mattered. Zoe didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I didn't even finish talking about my qualifications. You're honest, you're human, and you clearly don't give up easily. Derek stood up. That's enough. Zoe stood up too, her legs still shaking. Thank you. Thank you so much. You won't regret this, I promise. I'll work hard, I'll come in early and leave late and… Zoe? Yes? You're talking too much again. Right, sorry, stopping. She turned to leave, and that's when she saw her, a woman standing in the doorway. Tall, elegant, dark hair perfectly aligned, the woman from the restroom. And she was looking at Zoe as if she were already planning her funeral. The following Monday, Zoe arrived at work 40 minutes early with a coffee in hand and hope in her heart. By Friday, she would arrive home at 11 at night without coffee, without hope, and with serious doubts about her own mental capabilities. But she didn't know that yet. Good morning, Zoe greeted the receptionist on the 12th floor with her best smile. First day, Zoe Hartman, organizational development. The receptionist looked at her as if she were a stain on the carpet. Your desk is the third on the left. Miss Hale left instructions. Miss Hale, the woman from the restroom, the woman with the killer look. The woman who, Zoe discovered that morning, was none other than the company's executive director and Derek Callahan's right hand. Wonderful, Zoe thought. The person who hates me is basically second in command. She found her desk, a tiny cubicle squeezed between the copier and a plant that appeared to be in terminal condition, and sat down. There was an envelope on top of the keyboard. Welcome to the team. Following are the tasks for the first day. VH. Zoe opened it and swallowed hard. The list had 17 items. 17. For a first day. New employee integration report deliver by 2 p.m. Organizational climate analysis from last quarter, deliver by 3 p.m. Review of internal communication policies, deliver by 4 p.m. Training needs assessment by department, deliver by 5 p.m. And on it went. Is this normal? Zoe asked the colleague at the desk next to her, a red-headed woman named Denise. Denise looked at the list. Her eyes widened. That's a week's worth of work. To deliver today? Good luck. Zoe took a deep breath. Okay. You can do this. Just work fast, show dedication, prove your worth. At 10 in the morning, she had completed 3 tasks. At 11, Victoria appeared. Zoe. Her voice was as cold as an industrial freezer. The reports you turned in are in the wrong format. Wrong format? They need to be in spreadsheet form, not text document. But the instructions said text document. Victoria smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. The instructions were updated this morning. Didn't you get the memo? I didn't. Too bad. Redo everything. And we have an urgent print job. 300 copies of the procedures manual. Needed yesterday. 300? Is there a problem? Zoe forced a smile. None. She spent the next hour in the copy room, feeding the printer as if her life depended on it. Which, considering the overdue bills, wasn't far from the truth. At copy number 247, the printer jammed. No, Zoe whispered. No, please. She opened the cover. Paper stuck. Tried to pull it. The paper tore. You've got to be kidding me. 15 minutes and 2 paper cuts later, she managed to unjam the machine. At 1:45 p.m., Zoe ran down the hallway carrying 300 copies stacked up to her chin. She didn't see the coffee cart. The coffee cart saw her. The impact was cinematic. Papers flew. Coffee splashed. Zoe went to the floor in slow motion, trying to save as many documents as possible while falling. Ow, she groaned, lying on the carpet, covered in manuals and dripping coffee. Zoe? She turned her head. Derek Callahan was standing in the hallway, looking at the scene with an expression that mixed confusion and something that could be concern. Hi, she said, still on the floor. Everything's under control. You're covered in coffee. It's a look. I'm trying something new. He crouched down and extended his hand. Zoe accepted, feeling her face burn as he helped her up. What happened? Derek asked. I was delivering the copies Victoria asked for. 300 copies of the procedures manual. Derek frowned. That manual was digitized 2 years ago. Nobody uses the printed version. Zoe blinked. What? It's all in the internal system. 300 copies are unnecessary. She looked at the pile of coffee-stained papers scattered on the floor. 3 hours of work for nothing. Oh, was all she could say. Derek observed her for a moment. Is everything okay with you in the department? Yes, the answer came out too automatic, too high-pitched. Great, everything's great. Just first-day adjustments. He didn't look convinced. If you have any problems. There aren't any. No problems. 0 problems. Zoe started gathering the papers. Quiet. I just need to clean this up and get back to the reports that need to be redone because they were in the wrong format, which was actually the right format, but it was updated without me knowing, and... She stopped. Derek was looking at her that way again. The way she couldn't decipher. Zoe. Yes? You're shaking. She looked at her own hands. They were shaking. From exhaustion. From frustration. From something she didn't want to name. It's the caffeine, she lied. I had too much coffee. You're covered in coffee, not full of coffee. Yeah, that's the problem. I need more. She tried to laugh. It came out more like a sob. Derek opened his mouth to say something, but Victoria appeared in the hallway. Derek, she walked up to them with a radiant smile. The 2 o'clock meeting is confirmed. Her gaze slid to Zoe, to the papers on the floor, to the coffee on her clothes. Any problems here? None, Zoe said quickly. Everything under control. Victoria smiled. Great, because I still need those reformatted reports. By 3, remember? I remember. Wonderful. She guided Derek down the hallway and he looked back once before disappearing into the conference room. Zoe stood there alone, surrounded by ruined papers. You can do this, she told herself. You always do. But for the first time the words sounded empty. That night, at 11 o'clock, Zoe was still at her desk. The office was empty. The hallway lights off. And on her computer, a new email from Victoria had just arrived. The reports contained errors. Redo them. Deadline tomorrow, 7 a.m. Zoe stared at the screen, and for the first time since arriving in Philadelphia, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. 2 weeks after the 11 o'clock email, Zoe had developed dark circles that could be classified as historic landmarks. She had also developed an impressive ability to appear functional while operating on 3 hours of sleep and a diet based exclusively on vending machine coffee and granola bars she found forgotten in her purse. But that Thursday, at 5 in the afternoon, something different happened. Derek Callahan appeared at her desk. Zoe, she jumped out of her chair, knocking over an empty mug. Mr. Callahan. Hi, hello, good afternoon. She picked up the mug. Can I help you? I need to review the organizational climate project data. He looked around the open office where at least 15 people were pretending not to be listening. Not here. Where then? Walking. Zoe blinked. Walking? I think better in motion. Oh, right. Normal. People do that. Walk and think at the same time. She was talking too much again. Let me get my coat. She was already wearing 2 coats, one on top of the other. Because the heater in the cheap apartment she had rented didn't work properly, and she still hadn't thawed out since morning. Derek looked at the coats. Are you adequately bundled up? I'm like an onion, multiple layers, maximum thermal protection. Right. They walked to the elevator in silence. Zoe felt the stares of all her colleagues on her back, and one specific stare coming from Victoria's glass office that burned more than the others. Outside, the Philadelphia air was freezing, but the late afternoon sun painted the historic buildings in shades of orange and gold. Zoe had never noticed how beautiful the city was. She had been too busy surviving to notice. So, Derek began, walking beside her with precise strides. The organizational climate data. Yes, I finished the analysis yesterday, or early this morning, but who was counting? Satisfaction rates dropped 12% in the last quarter. Why? Communication. People don't feel like they're being heard. Departments work in isolation. Nobody knows what anyone else is doing. Derek was silent for a moment. And what do you suggest? Monthly interdepartmental meetings. Not the boring ones with endless presentations, real meetings where people can talk. Zoe gestured as she walked, and an anonymous suggestion channel. Sometimes people are afraid to speak directly. Afraid of what? Zoe hesitated. Of retaliation, of seeming weak, she almost said, of people like Victoria, but swallowed it, of judgment. Derek observed her from the side. Are you afraid of judgment? Everyone is. I'm not. Zoe laughed. You're the president. You can do whatever you want. That doesn't mean absence of judgment. It means people judge silently. She stopped walking. He stopped too. That was surprisingly profound, Zoe said. You seem surprised. It's just that you have this look of... She gestured vaguely at his face. Human spreadsheet, all logical and calculated. Human spreadsheet. With all due respect, the corner of his mouth lifted minimally. You're very honest. It's a flaw or a quality, depends on the day. They started walking again. They passed an old square with a fountain that didn't work and iron benches painted green. Can I ask you something personal? Derek said suddenly. Zoe almost stumbled. You can. Why do you write messages to yourself? The motivational messages? Yes. She shoved her hands in her pockets. The two coats suddenly didn't seem warm enough. Because sometimes I forget. Forget what? That I'm capable. Her voice got lower. I spent my whole life trying to prove I belonged somewhere. Anywhere. And every time I thought I had made it, the place disappeared. The company closed, the department was cut, the project was canceled. She looked at the buildings around them. So I started writing, to remind myself, because if I don't believe in me, who will? Derek was silent for so long that Zoe thought she had said too much. Again, sorry, she said, that was too heavy for a work walk. No, I understand, he said, and the simplicity of the phrase caught her by surprise. More than you imagine. They looked at each other. The late afternoon sun lit Derek's face in a way that made him seem almost soft. Almost human. Are you cold? He asked. I'm wearing 2 coats. I know, but you're shaking. That's nervousness, not cold. Why? Because you're being nice and it disorients me. Derek looked genuinely confused. Nice is disorienting? Coming from you? A little, yes. He took off his own coat, an overcoat that probably cost more than Zoe's rent, and extended it to her. I'm already wearing 2, she reminded him. Derek looked at the coat in his hands, then at her. Then at the coat again. Right, he said, not knowing what to do. This is logistically complicated. Zoe laughed, a real laugh for the first time in weeks. You tried. That counts. He put the coat back on, looking almost embarrassed. Derek Callahan. Embarrassed. The world really is upside down, Zoe thought. Across the square, hidden behind a pillar, Victoria Hale watched the two of them. Saw Derek offer the coat. Saw Zoe laugh. Saw something in his eyes she had never seen in 10 years working by his side. Something dangerous. Something that needed to be eliminated. She pulled out her phone and typed a quick message to Sandra, Derek's assistant. Need access to Zoe Hartman's project files. All of them. The response came in seconds. Sending now. Victoria smiled. The girl wanted to prove she belonged somewhere? Well, Victoria was going to make sure she didn't belong anywhere. Meanwhile, in the square, Zoe and Derek continued walking, unaware that they had just put an invisible target on both their backs, and that the person aiming never missed. 3 days after the walk through the city, Zoe discovered that Derek Callahan worked late. Very late. Like 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night, with the entire building empty and only the emergency lights on in the hallways. Late. She was also working late, not by choice, but because Victoria had accidentally deleted half the files from the organizational climate project, and Zoe needed to redo everything from scratch. At least that's what she thought had happened. Accidents happen. Computers fail. Files disappear. 3 times in the same week, Zoe? Really? She shook her head and kept typing. That's when she heard footsteps in the empty hallway. Zoe? Derek appeared in the office entrance, his jacket hanging on his arm, his tie loosened. He looked almost disheveled, by his standards at least. Mr. Callahan. She straightened in her chair. What are you doing here? I work here. Yes, but it's 10 at night. And you're here because my files disappeared and I need to redo the report for tomorrow morning. Derek frowned. Disappeared? Yeah, for the 3rd day in a row. Zoe forced a smile. I think my computer hates me, or the universe does, probably both. He walked to her desk and looked at the screen. Did you save backup copies? I did, on the server, which was also corrupted apparently. That's statistically unlikely. I know, but here we are. Derek observed her for a long moment. Do you want help? Zoe almost fell out of her chair. You want to help me with administrative work? You look exhausted. Thanks. Nothing like a compliment at 10 at night. It wasn't an insult, it was an observation. An observation that implies I look terrible. An observation that implies you're working too hard. Zoe didn't know what to say. No one had ever cared about how much she was working. Usually they only cared about the result. I can handle it, she said. I know you can. Derek pulled up a chair and sat beside her. But you shouldn't have to handle it alone. Okay, that was unexpectedly sweet. They worked side by side for almost an hour. Derek typed fast, efficient, without wasting a movement. Zoe tried to concentrate on her own work, but it was hard when he was so close she could smell his cologne. The same cologne from the airplane shoulder. Stop thinking about the shoulder, Zoe. Stop thinking about the shoulder. Done, Derek said, breaking the silence. I recovered 60% of the data from the secondary backup server. There's a secondary backup server? There is. And nobody told me this? Apparently not. Zoe let out a sigh of relief so deep it was almost comical. You just saved my mental sanity, and possibly my job. You wouldn't lose your job because of corrupted files. Tell that to Victoria. The name escaped before she could hold it back. Derek looked at her. Victoria? Nothing. Forget it. I didn't say anything. Zoe turned back to the screen. Thanks for the help. Really? Silence. Zoe. Yes? Look at me. She turned and realized he was closer than she thought. Much closer. Is something happening that you're not telling me? He asked. Yes, your right hand is trying to destroy my career and probably my will to live. No, she lied. Just adjustments. Learning curve. Derek didn't look convinced. You can tell me if something's wrong. I know, but you're not going to tell me. Zoe sighed. I don't want to seem weak or problematic or the new employee who complains about everything. You wouldn't seem like any of that. You don't know what I was going to say. I don't need to know. He tilted his head slightly. I trust you. He trusts me. Zoe's heart did a leap that had nothing to do with professionalism. Why? She asked, her voice lower. You barely know me. I know enough. You know a woman who drooled on your shoulder and carries restaurant menus in her folder. I also know a woman who writes courage messages to herself, who doesn't give up even when everything seems impossible. His eyes met hers. That's rare. Zoe swallowed hard. When did they get so close? She could see the details of his face, the jawline, the dark eyelashes, the small scar above his left eyebrow that she had never noticed. Derek, she whispered. He leaned in. She leaned in. The air between them became dense, charged with something neither of them could name. Their lips were inches apart when, working late, the voice cut through the moment like an ice blade. Zoe pulled away so fast she hit her hand on the pen on top of the desk. The pen flew, spun in the air, and hit her right on the forehead. Ow! Victoria Hale was standing at the office entrance, arms crossed, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Miss Hale! Zoe rubbed her forehead. We were. The files. I saw the files, Victoria said smoothly. Very dedicated, Zoe, working late with the company president. The tone was as sweet as poison. Be careful not to mix personal with professional. It could be misinterpreted. Zoe's face burned. We weren't. I didn't ask. Victoria turned to Derek. I need your signature on some documents in your office. Derek stood up slowly. His face had returned to its usual neutral expression. Of course. He looked at Zoe one last time. Good night, Miss Hartman. Miss Hartman, not Zoe. Good night, Mr. Callahan. He left with Victoria, and Zoe was left alone in the empty office, with her forehead throbbing and her heart in pieces. You almost kissed your boss, she thought. Your billionaire boss. In the office, at midnight. She sank into her chair. What's wrong with you, Zoe? On the other side of the hallway, walking beside Derek, Victoria smiled. Interesting employee, that Zoe, she commented casually. Derek didn't respond. It would be a shame if she got involved in some scandal. His steps hesitated for half a second, but he kept walking. And Victoria knew exactly what the next step would be. The morning after the almost kiss, Zoe was summoned to an emergency meeting with the executive board. She didn't know what she had done wrong, but with the luck she'd been having lately, it could be anything. From the corrupted files to that time, she confused the men's restroom with the women's on the third floor. "Miss Hartman," Victoria said, standing at the head of the conference table, with a smile that would make a shark look friendly. "We have a proposal for you." Zoe looked around, 7 board members. Derek sitting in the corner, his face unreadable, and Victoria, radiating the energy of a predator about to strike. "A proposal?" Zoe repeated. "The internal communication restructuring project." Victoria slid a folder across the table. "We want you to lead it," Zoe blinked. "Me?" "You've demonstrated impressive potential in the last few weeks." The words came out of Victoria's mouth like poisoned honey. "The board agrees that you're the ideal person, but I've been here less than a month." "Exactly. Fresh perspective. New eyes." Victoria tilted her head. "Unless you don't feel capable?" The trap was clear. Refusing would mean seeming insecure. Accepting would mean— Zoe looked at Derek. He was looking back, an almost imperceptible crease between his eyebrows. "I accept," Zoe said. Victoria smiled. "Wonderful. The presentation will be in 2 weeks, for the full board and the main investors." 2 weeks? "Is there a problem?" "Yes, this is impossible." "None," Zoe said. "It will be a pleasure." The following 2 weeks were a blur of cold coffee, sleepless nights, and spreadsheets that multiplied like gremlins. Zoe dove into the project with everything she had. Analyzed data, interviewed employees, created charts, redesigned flowcharts. It was the most complex work she had ever done, and someone was sabotaging every step. Numbers she was certain she had checked appeared wrong in the final versions. Important emails disappeared from her inbox. Meetings were scheduled at conflicting times without her being notified. "Denise," Zoe whispered to her colleague on Friday of the first week, "did you send the email with the finance department data?" "I sent it yesterday." "I didn't get it." "It's in your inbox, I'm sure of it." Zoe checked. It wasn't there. Checked the trash, the spam, the archived folders. Nothing. "Maybe it was a system error," Denise said, but she didn't sound convinced. Neither was Zoe. In the second week, Derek appeared at her desk. "Zoe." She looked up. She probably looked like a zombie. A zombie with dark circles and hair that hadn't seen a comb in 2 days. "Hi," she said, her voice hoarse. "Are you okay?" "I'm great." "Why?" "Because you're wearing your shirt inside out." Zoe looked down. The label was clearly visible at the neckline. "This is a fashion choice," she lied. "It's trendy. Textile deconstruction." "Textile deconstruction. It's a thing, I swear." Derek pulled up a chair and sat down. "How's the project going?" "Fantastic. Wonderful. Totally under control." Zoe. "Okay. It's a disaster." She sank into her chair. "The numbers don't add up. Emails disappear. And I think the printer on the 3rd floor is possessed because it only jams when I'm near it." Derek was silent for a moment. "You need help." "I can handle myself." "I know you can, but you don't have to." Zoe looked at him. He seemed genuinely concerned. In his way, in the robotic and awkward way that was strangely charming. "I could," Derek began, clearly uncomfortable. "Offer support." "Support?" "Emotional, if necessary." Zoe almost laughed. "Are you offering emotional support?" "I'm trying." "How does this work? Do you have a manual?" "I don't have a manual." He frowned. "Should there be a manual?" "No, I just—" Zoe shook her head. "You're adorable." Derek looked shocked. "Adorable?" In a strange and confusing way. Awkward silence. Awkward silence. "I researched motivational phrases," he said finally. "You researched?" "To help." He cleared his throat. "You are capable of overcoming any challenge." The phrase came out so mechanical it could have been computer-generated. "Thank you," Zoe said, holding back laughter. "Believe in your unlimited potential." "Derek, every obstacle is an opportunity for growth." "Are you reading from a card?" He looked at his own hand, where, in fact, there was a small card with notes. "I wanted to be prepared." Zoe couldn't hold it in. She laughed, a real laugh that came from deep in her soul and made her ribs hurt. "That's the sweetest thing anyone has ever done for me," she said, wiping a tear from the corner of her eye. "I wasn't trying to be sweet, I was trying to be helpful. You were both." Derek put the card back in his pocket, looking almost embarrassed. "I'm not good with feelings," he admitted. "I noticed. But I want you to know that." He stopped, swallowed. "I care about you, about the project, about all of this." Zoe's heart squeezed. "Derek?" "Mr. Callahan," Victoria's voice cut through the moment. "The 3 o'clock meeting is confirmed." She was standing at the hallway entrance, her eyes fixed on the two of them. Derek stood up. "I'm coming." He looked at Zoe one last time. "You can do this," he said. "I know you can." And he left. Victoria remained a second longer, just long enough for Zoe to see the minimal smile on her lips, the smile of someone who knows something you don't know. That night, alone in the office, Zoe reviewed the presentation for the 100th time. The numbers were right. She was sure of it. She had checked 3 times. But when she opened the file for the last time, something was different. The charts had changed. The percentages were wrong. And in the lower corner of the presentation, almost invisible, there was a modification record. Modified by V. Hale, V7 p.m. Zoe stared at the screen, her heart freezing. The presentation was tomorrow, and she had just discovered she was being sabotaged. The Callahan Air auditorium was packed, 120 people, board members, investors, managers from all departments, and in the front row, Victoria Hale, with a serene smile that didn't match the predator gleam in her eyes. Zoe was backstage, holding the presentation remote with hands sweating so much that the plastic was slipping between her fingers. "Okay," she whispered to herself. "You fixed the numbers. You saved a clean copy. You can do this." She had spent the entire night fixing the data that Victoria had altered. At 4 in the morning, she finally had a correct version. At 5, she made 3 backup copies in different places. At 6, she had so much coffee that her heart felt like a panicked hummingbird. "Miss Hartman?" An assistant appeared. "It's your turn." "Breathe, Zoe, just breathe." She walked onto the stage. The lights were blinding. The auditorium seemed even bigger from above. 120 faces looking at her, waiting, judging. "Good morning, everyone," Zoe began, her voice coming out higher than intended. "Thank you for being here for the presentation of the Internal Communication Restructuring Project." She clicked to the first slide, and her stomach dropped. The slide was wrong. It wasn't the version she had saved. It was the sabotaged version. With the numbers switched, the charts distorted, the conclusions completely wrong. No. As we can see, Zoe looked at the screen, trying to process. The data shows that the numbers didn't make sense. She knew they didn't make sense. Anyone with basic math knowledge would know they didn't make sense. Murmurs began in the audience. "Those numbers are wrong," someone said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "The percentage doesn't add up," another agreed. Victoria leaned toward the investor beside her, whispering something with an expression of feigned concern. Zoe felt her face burn. There was an error." She clicked to the next slide. "Also wrong. Let me." Clicked again. "Wrong. Again, wrong." "Don't faint," she whispered to herself, so low she thought no one had heard. "Don't faint. Don't faint." Someone in the third row laughed. "They're laughing at me." "Miss Hartman," Victoria stood up, her voice smooth as silk. "Perhaps it would be better to stop. Clearly there's been a failure of preparation." "No," Zoe said, louder than intended. "I prepared. I checked everything. Someone switched the files." More murmurs. Some shook their heads. "That's a serious accusation," Victoria said, still with that irritating calm. "Are you suggesting that someone sabotaged your work?" "Yes. I don't know. The words stuck in Zoe's throat. She looked at the audience, saw the disbelief on their faces, the pity, the judgment. "You failed, in front of everyone, like always." Her eyes burned. She wasn't going to cry. She couldn't cry. "Not there. I have the correct version," she tried. "On my computer, if you give me a few minutes." "I think we've seen enough," one of the investors said, standing up. "Please," Zoe whispered. No one heard her. Or almost no one. "Sit down." The voice cut through the auditorium like lightning. Zoe turned her head. Derek Callahan was standing in the middle of the audience with an expression she had never seen before. It wasn't the usual neutrality. It was something more intense, more dangerous. "Derek," Victoria said, her smile faltering for the first time. "I didn't ask what you think." He walked down the center aisle, climbing the stage stairs. "Sit down." Everyone. People sat. Derek stopped beside Zoe. She was shaking. He could see it. "It's okay," he said quietly, "just for her." "I saw." "Saw what?" He didn't answer. He turned to the audience. "For the last 10 minutes, you watched an employee be humiliated for mistakes she didn't make." His voice was calm, but carried a weight that silenced even the murmurs. "I'd like to show you something." He pulled a flash drive from his pocket and connected it to the auditorium computer. On the screen appeared a system log. "These are the modification logs from the company server," Derek explained. At 11:47 p.m. last night, Miss Hartman's presentation files were modified. He clicked. The user responsible for the modification was V. Hale. The silence in the auditorium was absolute. Victoria stood up. "This is absurd, I never—" "Here are the emails you redirected away from her inbox," Derek continued, clicking to the next slide. "And here, the original reports that you altered in her first week." Another click. "And here, the instructions you changed without notifying her, causing the delays for which you blamed her in private meetings." Zoe was frozen. He knew. All this time, he knew. "Derek," Victoria took a step forward, the mask finally falling. "You can't be serious. I built this company by your side for 10 years. And for the last 2 months, you tried to destroy an employee because you felt threatened." His eyes were cold. "This ends now. She's just a nobody. A girl you met on a plane. She's the most honest person who's ever walked into this company." Derek looked at Zoe. "And you tried to break her because you can't stand that someone is genuine in a world you made toxic." Victoria opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You're going to regret this," she said finally. "I doubt it." 2 security guards appeared at the side doors of the auditorium. Victoria looked at them, then at Derek, then at Zoe. "This isn't over," she hissed, and she left, escorted, leaving behind a deafening silence. Derek turned to the audience. "The presentation will be rescheduled for next week, with the correct data. Dismissed." People began to leave, murmuring among themselves, looking at Zoe with expressions ranging from shock to admiration. When the auditorium finally emptied, Zoe was still standing on the stage, shaking. "You knew," she whispered. "All this time." "I suspected," Derek said. "I needed proof. Why didn't you tell me?" He was silent for a moment. "Because I needed it to be public, so no one would doubt you." Zoe felt the tears finally escape. "Thank you," she whispered. Derek reached out and, with a gentleness she didn't expect from him, wiped a tear from her face. "You did it, Zoe," he said, "like you always do." And for the first time, she believed it. 48 hours after the scandal in the auditorium, Victoria Hale returned to the building. No one expected this. Everyone thought she had disappeared forever, swallowed by shame and lawyers. But there she was, at 9 in the morning on a Wednesday, crossing the lobby as if she still owned the place. And she was heading straight for the board meeting room. "She's lost her mind," Denise whispered to Zoe, who had stopped in the middle of the hallway, paralyzed. "What does she think she's doing?" Zoe didn't respond. She just watched Victoria disappear behind the glass doors. 10 minutes later, a message arrived on every computer in the company. "Extraordinary meeting. All employees, main auditorium, immediately." The auditorium was even more packed than on the day of the disastrous presentation. Employees from all floors squeezed into the chairs and aisles. The air was charged with tension and curiosity. Zoe found a spot in the back, trying to stay invisible. It didn't work. "That's her," someone whispered. "The girl from the presentation." "The one who almost fainted?" "The one Derek defended." Zoe wanted to crawl under her chair. The side doors opened and Victoria walked onto the stage, followed by 2 board members who looked deeply uncomfortable. "Thank you all for coming," Victoria began, her voice controlled, her smile sharp. "I know the last few days have been confusing, and I'm here to clarify some misunderstandings." Murmurs in the audience. "What happened at the presentation 2 days ago was regrettable," she continued, "but the narrative that spread doesn't match reality." Zoe felt her stomach sink. "The truth is, I was the victim of a setup." Victoria looked directly at where Zoe was sitting. A setup orchestrated by an ambitious employee who used questionable methods to get close to the president of this company. The silence in the auditorium was deafening. "Zoe Hartman wasn't hired on merit," Victoria said, each word loaded with venom. "She was hired because she seduced Derek Callahan. And when I discovered the truth and tried to protect this company, she manipulated the evidence to incriminate me." "That's a lie." The voice came out of Zoe's throat before she could control it. All heads turned. "Ah, Miss Hartman," Victoria smiled. "Want to defend yourself? Please, tell everyone how you met Mr. Callahan. On a plane, wasn't it? How convenient." Zoe stood up, her legs shaking. I met him on a plane because it was the only available seat. I was going to an interview, a normal interview, for a normal job. And you ended up sleeping on the shoulder of the president of a billion-dollar company. Very convenient indeed. Nervous laughter in the audience. That was an accident. Of course it was. Victoria crossed her arms. Just like all the moments you spent together afterward. The walks through the city, the nights in the office, everything. Accidents. Zoe felt her face burn. None of that is what you're insinuating. Then explain to me, why would the president of Callahan Air publicly defend a basic-level employee he's known for less than 2 months? Victoria approached the microphone. Unless there's something more. The auditorium exploded in whispers. Zoe opened her mouth, but no words came out. The tears burned in her eyes. The humiliation was worse than anything Victoria had done before. Enough. The voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Derek Callahan was standing at the side entrance of the auditorium. No one had seen him enter. "Derek," Victoria said, her smile wavering. "How good that." "I said enough." He walked down the center aisle. Each step echoed in the silence. When he reached the stage, he didn't go up. He stood in the center of the auditorium, where everyone could see him. "Victoria is right about one thing," he said, his voice clear. "I defended Zoe Hartman publicly, and I'm going to explain why." The audience held its breath. "It wasn't because she seduced me." His eyes met Zoe's for a second. "It was because she saved this company." Confused murmurs. In the last 2 months, while Victoria sabotaged her work, Zoe identified communication failures that were costing millions in lost productivity. While she had impossible deadlines and corrupted files, she interviewed employees from all departments and discovered problems that had existed for years. Derek looked at the audience. Problems that no one had the courage to report because they were afraid. The silence now was different, heavy with recognition. "Afraid of people like Victoria," Derek continued, "who turned this company into a place where honesty is punished and loyalty is confused with submission." "This is ridiculous." Victoria took a step forward. "You're destroying your reputation because of an honest person," Derek interrupted. "Something you never were." Victoria opened her mouth, closed it. Her face was red with fury. "You're going to regret this," she hissed. "You're both going to regret this." "I already have regrets," Derek said calmly, "that I took so long to see who you really are." 2 security guards appeared again at the doors. Victoria looked around, searching for allies. She found none. "This isn't over," she said. "For you, it is." She was escorted out for the second time in 2 days. But this time, when the doors closed behind her, something changed in the air. Someone started clapping. Then another, and another. In seconds, the entire auditorium was on its feet, applauding. Zoe couldn't move. The tears finally escaped, running down her face without her being able to stop them. Derek walked up to her. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. "I don't know," she whispered. "I think so. I think I'm crying from relief." "You deserve the relief. You called me honest in front of everyone." "You are. You said I saved the company." "You did." Zoe laughed through the tears. "This is a lot to process." "I know. You just destroyed your executive director in front of all the employees." "I know. And now what?" Derek looked around. Employees were still applauding. Some were laughing. Others were imitating Victoria's shocked face when she was escorted out. A man from finance had even stiffened his jaw and raised his nose in a frighteningly accurate way. "Now," Derek said, turning back to look at Zoe, "we rebuild." She wiped her face. "Together?" He almost smiled. "Together." That night, alone in her apartment, Zoe looked at herself in the mirror. For the first time in a long time, she didn't need to convince herself of anything. She already knew. "You did it, Zoe." And this time, she finally believed it. 1 week after Victoria was escorted out for the last time, Zoe discovered the rooftop. It wasn't just any rooftop. It was the rooftop on the 45th floor, 4 floors above Derek's office, accessible only by an emergency staircase that no one seemed to use. A forgotten place on top of a building that never forgot anything. Zoe found it by accident, of course. She was looking for the bathroom on the 44th floor. Which apparently didn't exist, and ended up going up the wrong staircase, opening the wrong door, and coming face to face with the most beautiful view of Philadelphia she had ever seen. Since then, she went there every night after work. To breathe, to think, to have those 5 minutes of silence that her noisy mind needed so much. That Friday, exactly 1 week after the second auditorium scandal, Zoe was sitting on the edge of the rooftop, her feet dangling in the void, looking at the city lights that were turning on one by one. The crisis had passed. Victoria was gone. The internal communication project, the real one, with the correct data, had been successfully presented. The investors had applauded, the board had approved. Zoe should have been happy. So why did she feel so empty? You know that's dangerous, right? She jumped so high she almost actually fell off the rooftop. Oh my God! Zoe turned around, her heart racing. Are you trying to give me a heart attack? Derek was standing at the stairway door, still in his suit, his tie loosened as it always was at the end of the day. Sorry, he said, not looking the least bit sorry. I thought you heard me come up. You walk like a cat, a ninja cat, in silent soled shoes. Is that a compliment? I'm still deciding. Derek walked over to her and stopped beside her, looking at the city. How did you find this place? He asked. I got lost looking for the bathroom. The bathroom is on the 43rd floor. I know that now, after going up 2 floors in the wrong direction and almost having an existential crisis in an emergency stairwell. The corner of his mouth lifted. May I? He pointed to the space beside her. It's your building. Technically it belongs to the bank until I finish paying off the financing. Zoe laughed. Billionaires have financing? Billionaires have everything, including creative debts. He sat down beside her, his long legs stretched out, his expensive shoes inches from the void. They stayed in silence for a moment, the kind of silence that wasn't uncomfortable, just present. Why do you come here? Derek asked finally. Because it's quiet. Zoe looked at the lights. In my head, it's never quiet. There's always a voice talking, planning, criticizing, reminding me of everything I did wrong. But up here, she shrugged. Up here, the voice gets quieter. Derek observed her. What voice? Mine, the pessimistic version of it at least. Zoe smiled without humor. Don't you have that? A voice that keeps telling you you're not good enough? I do. Really? Everyone does. You seem so in control all the time, like nothing affects you. Seeming and being are different things. Zoe turned to face him. What does your voice say? Derek was silent for so long she thought he wasn't going to answer. That I'm incapable of connection, he said finally, his voice lower. That I understand numbers and contracts and strategies, but I don't understand people. That I'll spend my whole life surrounded by people and completely alone. Zoe's heart squeezed. Derek, my father was like that, he continued, still looking at the city. Brilliant, successful, and absolutely incapable of showing affection. He died when I was 16. At the funeral, I couldn't cry. A pause. I thought there was something wrong with me. There isn't. You don't know that. I do know, Zoe said firmly, because I've seen you. I saw you stand up in the middle of an auditorium to defend an employee you barely knew. I saw you keep a little card with motivational phrases in your pocket because you wanted to help me. I saw you wipe a tear from my face with more gentleness than anyone has ever shown me. Derek finally looked at her. That doesn't mean I know how to love. It means you know how to care, and that's halfway there. Silence. The wind blew, bringing the cold night air. Zoe shivered. You're cold, Derek observed. I'm always cold. It's my natural state of existence. He took off his jacket and put it over her shoulders. This time she wasn't wearing 2 coats. Thank you, she whispered. You're welcome. They stayed like that for a moment. The jacket was still warm from his body. It smelled like that cologne she'd known since the plane. Zoe? Yes? Can I tell you something? Her heart sped up. You can. Derek took a deep breath. She had never seen him take a deep breath before speaking. He always seemed so sure, so calculated. I don't know how to do this, he said. Do what? This. He gestured between the two of them. What's happening? What I feel. I don't have the vocabulary for it. I don't have experience. I don't have a manual. You and your manuals. I know. He almost smiled. But it's true. I spent my whole life avoiding connections because I thought I was incapable of them, that it was easier to stay alone than to disappoint someone. Zoe swallowed hard. And now? Now I found you. His eyes met hers. And for the first time, being alone seems like the wrong choice. The world stopped, or at least it seemed to stop. The noise of the city disappeared. The wind stopped blowing. There were only the two of them, on top of a building, in the middle of a conversation that was changing everything. "Derek," Zoe began, "I need you." The words came out of him as if they had been forcibly pulled out. Raw. Vulnerable. Completely different from anything she had ever heard from him. "I don't know if I'll do this right," he continued. "I'll probably make mistakes. I'll forget to say the right things. I'll work too much and be present too little. I'll frustrate you in 1,000 ways I can't even predict. Derek, but I want to try," he swallowed. "With you, if you'll let me." Zoe was shaking, not from cold, from something much bigger. "I don't know if I deserve this," she whispered. "What?" "Someone who defends me, who stands up in the middle of auditoriums for me, who climbs 45 floors just to find me." Her eyes filled with tears. "I spent my whole life thinking I wasn't enough, that I needed to prove my worth every day, every hour, every second. And now you're here telling me you need me, and I don't know how to process that." "Zoe?" "Because nobody ever needed me." A tear escaped. "People needed my work, my energy, my ability to solve problems. But me? The person I am when I take off all the layers? Nobody ever wanted that." Derek moved closer, slowly, as if she were a bird that could fly away at any moment. "I want that," he said. "All the layers, including the ones you think are flaws." Zoe laughed through her tears. "You don't even know what they are." "Then tell me." "I talk to myself all the time. It's embarrassing." "I know. I've been hearing it since the plane. I have chronic anxiety, and I need 8 hours to make simple decisions like what ice cream flavor to choose. We have time. I cry watching pet commercials." "Who doesn't cry?" Zoe laughed again. "I'm a complete disaster. A hurricane of poorly organized emotions. Do you really want that in your meticulously planned life?" Derek looked at her for a long moment. "I do," he said simply. "More than anything I've ever wanted." Zoe's heart was beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Okay, Zoe, he just said he wants you. The gorgeous billionaire you met drooling on his shoulder wants you. Okay," she whispered to herself. "Breathe, don't panic, and for the love of everything sacred, don't kiss wrong." Derek raised an eyebrow. "Kiss wrong?" Zoe froze. "Did I say that out loud?" "You did, you heard? Every word." "Is there any possibility of a hole opening up in this rooftop and swallowing me right now?" "Unlikely." "I was afraid of that." Derek moved closer. They were so close now that she could see every detail of his face, the jawline, the gray eyes that seemed softer than ever, the almost smile that she had learned to recognize. "For your information," he said quietly, "there's no wrong way to kiss. You clearly never saw my attempts." "I'd like to see them." Zoe swallowed. Was that a pickup line?" "It was an attempt. I'm not good with pickup lines." "It was a good pickup line." "Really? By your standards? Is that a compliment? I'm still deciding." They looked at each other. The air between them was charged with anticipation. "Zoe," Derek said. "Yes? Are you going to kiss me, or do I have to make a PowerPoint presentation about the benefits of taking initiative?" Zoe laughed, a real laugh that came from deep in her soul. "You're ridiculous," she said. "I know. And sweet, that's new, and I'm going to kiss you now." "Please." She leaned in, he leaned in. And when their lips finally met, it wasn't perfect. It was awkward. Her nose bumped his. She laughed in the middle of the kiss. He smiled against her mouth. But it was real, and it was theirs. When they separated, Zoe was smiling so openly that her face hurt. "So?" she asked. "Wrong kiss?" "It was the best wrong kiss of my life. You're very good with words when you want to be." "I have my moments." She rested her forehead against his. "And now?" she whispered. "Now," Derek said, "we figure it out together. Even if it's hard? Especially if it's hard." Zoe closed her eyes. "You did it, Zoe, you always do." But this time, she didn't need to tell herself, because she had someone beside her who believed it too. They stayed on the rooftop for another hour, talking about everything and nothing, laughing at jokes that only made sense to the two of them. When they finally went down, holding hands, Zoe stopped in the hallway on the 41st floor. "Derek?" "Yes?" "Do you still have the card?" "What card?" "The one with the motivational phrases." He hesitated. "Maybe." "Can I see it?" Derek reached into the inside pocket of his jacket, the same jacket that was still over Zoe's shoulders, and pulled out a crumpled card that had clearly been handled many times. Zoe read out loud, "You are capable of overcoming any challenge. Believe in your unlimited potential. Every obstacle is an opportunity for growth. She looked at him. You really researched this? At 3 in the morning, on a night when I couldn't sleep because I was worried about you. Her heart melted. Can I keep it? Why? Because it's the most romantic thing anyone has ever done for me, and I want to keep it forever. Derek looked at her for a moment. You can, he said finally, but with one condition. What? You need to teach me how to write better motivational messages, because these clearly came from a generic self-help website. Zoe laughed. Deal. She put the card in her pocket, and she knew, in that moment, that she had found something she never expected to find. Not just a job, not just a city, not just a future, but someone who chose her. Exactly as she was. That night, when Zoe got home, she found a message on her phone from Derek. Forgot to mention, Monday's board meeting will announce a promotion. You should be there. Zoe stared at the screen. A promotion? Before she could respond, another message arrived. And this time, try not to trip on the rug. She laughed alone in the empty apartment, and for the first time since arriving in Philadelphia, the silence didn't feel lonely. The following Monday, Zoe was promoted to Director of Organizational Culture. She discovered this when she arrived at work and found a new sign on the door of a room that didn't exist before, or that she had never noticed, which was equally possible given her history of getting lost in the building. Is this a joke? She asked Denise, who was standing beside her with a huge smile. It's your new office. I have an office? With a window? A window? And a plant. Zoe looked inside. There really was a plant, and a desk, and a chair that looked comfortable, and a view of Philadelphia that wasn't as good as the rooftops but was still a view. I'm going to cry, she said. Please don't. You've cried enough in the last week to fill an aquarium. It was very emotional. It was epic, but enough tears. Denise pushed her inside. Go, Director. Conquer the corporate world. The following months were the strangest and most wonderful of Zoe's life. Strange, because she still didn't completely believe that all of this was real. Every morning, she woke up expecting to discover it had been an elaborate dream induced by too much coffee and lack of sleep. Wonderful, because, well, Derek. Dating Derek Callahan was a unique experience. He was thoughtful in unexpected ways, like memorizing her coffee order after hearing it just once, or showing up in her office with sandwiches when she forgot to eat lunch. But he was also completely lost with other things, like showing affection in public or using words that didn't sound like quarterly reports. I significantly appreciate your presence, he said once in the middle of dinner. Zoe choked on her wine. You what? Appreciate your presence. It's pleasant. Derek, that sounds like a performance review. I was trying to be romantic. Try again. He frowned, clearly processing. I enjoy being with you? Better. You're the person I most enjoy being with. See, that wasn't so hard. It was extremely difficult. My palms are sweating. Zoe laughed so hard she almost knocked over her glass. But not everything was easy. 3 months after the first kiss on the rooftop, Zoe woke up at 3 in the morning in a panic. She was at Derek's apartment, a place that still intimidated her with its minimalist decor and lack of clutter. She sat up in bed, her heart racing, trying to breathe. Derek woke up immediately. What's wrong? Nothing. Go back to sleep. Zoe, She rubbed her face. Had a nightmare. About? You realizing you made a mistake. Derek sat up beside her. What kind of mistake? Me. Her voice trembled. You realizing I'm not worth the work, that I'm too complicated, that you deserved someone more balanced. Silence. Zoe, Derek said finally, look at me. She looked. I was never anyone's choice, he said, his voice lower than she had ever heard. In school, I was the weird one. In college, I was the antisocial one. At work, I was the boss nobody could read. A pause. Women were interested in my money, my position, what I represented. But in me, in the man who doesn't know how to express emotions and find spreadsheets more comfortable than conversations? Zoe swallowed hard. Derek? You were the first person who chose me. His eyes shone in the darkness. Not the president, not the billionaire, me, the awkward man who researches motivational phrases at 3 in the morning because he doesn't know what to say. A tear ran down Zoe's face. So no, Derek continued, I'm not going to realize I made a mistake, because you're the best decision I ever made. She hugged him. Hard, as if he might disappear if she let go. I love you, she whispered. It was the first time she had said it. Derek tensed for a second, then relaxed. I love you too, he responded, even though I'm still learning what that means. We'll learn together. Together, he agreed. The next morning, Zoe tried to make breakfast in his apartment. It was a disaster. Why do you have a coffee maker that looks like a spaceship control panel? She yelled from the kitchen. Derek appeared in the doorway, still in pajamas. It's an Italian espresso machine. It has 17 buttons. Each one does something different. I just want coffee. Regular coffee. Coffee-colored coffee. The third button from the left. Zoe pressed it. The machine made a noise that sounded like a plane taking off and spit out a liquid that definitely wasn't coffee. This is green, she said. You pressed the cleaning button. Why does the cleaning button have the same color as the coffee button? Derek walked over, took the green cup, poured it in the sink, and pressed the correct button. 30 seconds later, real coffee came out. You could have done that from the beginning, Zoe grumbled. But then I wouldn't have seen you fight with a coffee maker. You're a cruel man. You love me anyway. Unfortunately. He smiled. A real smile, one of those that lit up his whole face. Zoe melted. Okay, she admitted, you're cute when you smile. Only when I smile? Don't ask for too many compliments. Later that day, at Zoe's messy apartment, the complete opposite of Derek's, they tried to make a snack together. Derek was holding a jar of jelly like it was a bomb. Why won't it open? He asked, genuinely confused. You need to turn the lid. I'm turning it. The other way. He turned. The jar didn't open. Let me try, Zoe said. I can do it. Derek, you're turning red. It's physical exertion. It's a jar of jelly, an extremely well-sealed jar of jelly. Zoe took the jar from his hands, tapped the lid on the edge of the table, and opened it with one twist. Derek stared at the open jar as if it were witchcraft. How did you do that? Poor people's trick. You learn. I need to write this down. You're going to write down how to open a jar of jelly. I'll make a document. You can't make a document about this. Why not? Because it's a jar of jelly. Domestic procedures are important. Zoe shook her head, laughing. You're impossible. You love me anyway. That phrase is going to repeat a lot, isn't it? Probably. He leaned in and kissed her, tasting like coffee and promises. When they separated, Zoe was smiling. You know, she said, I think we're going to be okay. I think so too. Even with you not knowing how to open jars? I have other qualities. Like? He thought, I know how to make very good spreadsheets. Zoe laughed. And in that moment, in the messy apartment with open jelly and cold coffee, she knew she had found her place. That night, Derek sent a message. I have a surprise for you. Friday. Wear something nice. Zoe stared at the screen, her heart racing. A surprise? From the man who planned even the way to open jars? This could only mean one thing. Friday arrived like a hurricane of anxiety and waterproof mascara. Zoe had spent the entire week trying to figure out what Derek was planning. She asked directly. He dodged. She tried to bribe Sandra, the assistant. Sandra laughed and said she preferred to keep her job. She seriously considered searching his office, but decided that probably counted as trespassing, even as his girlfriend. Wear something nice, she repeated to the mirror for the 100th time. What does something nice mean? Nice casual? Nice formal? Nice as in, we're going to dinner at an expensive place? Or nice as in, we're going to walk around Philadelphia and I'm going to trip on every cobblestone? The mirror didn't answer. Typical. She opted for a navy blue dress she had bought 3 weeks ago and never had the courage to wear. It was elegant without being excessive, comfortable enough to walk in, and it matched Derek's eyes. Not that she was thinking about that when she bought it. Okay, she was totally thinking about that. At 7 at night, Derek appeared at her apartment door, and Zoe forgot how to breathe. He was wearing a different suit than usual, not corporate gray, dark blue, almost matching her dress. His hair was slightly less perfect than normal, as if he had run his hand through it several times out of nervousness. Derek Callahan nervous. The universe was clearly collapsing. Hi, he said. Hi, she replied. Silence. You look beautiful, he said. You too, I mean handsome, in the masculine form. Although beautiful would work too if you wanted. I'm not judging, it's 2024, people can be whatever they want. Derek raised an eyebrow. You're nervous. You're nervous? Why? Just because you sent a mysterious message about a surprise and asked me to wear something nice, and now you're at my door looking like you stepped out of a photo shoot. Why would I be nervous? I'm nervous too. Zoe stopped talking. You are? Extremely. Oh, she breathed. That actually makes me feel better. I'm glad to help. He extended his hand. Shall we? The car took them to a part of Philadelphia that Zoe recognized immediately. The square. The fountain that didn't work. The iron benches painted green. The place where they had walked for the first time months ago, when Derek tried to offer his coat and she was already wearing two. You brought me here, she whispered. This is where I realized, Derek said. Realized what? That I was completely lost. Zoe turned to look at him. In the good way, he added. Lost in you. In the way you talk. In the way you laugh at your own jokes. In the way you shake when you're nervous, but won't admit it. I don't shake. You're shaking now. It's cold. It's June. Emotional cold. Derek smiled. One of those rare smiles that transformed his entire face. Come, he said. I want to show you something. They walked through the square, the city lights shining around them like a sea of earthly stars. Philadelphia had never seemed so beautiful. Or maybe Zoe had never stopped to really look. Derek guided her to the center of the square, near the silent fountain. Here, he said. Here what? This is where you said you never felt like you belonged anywhere. Zoe swallowed hard. She remembered that conversation. She remembered the pain in her own words. She remembered thinking she was revealing too much to a man she barely knew. I remember, she said quietly. Me too. Derek turned to face her. I think about that conversation every day since then. Why? Because I wanted to tell you something, in that moment. But I couldn't. Zoe's heart was beating so hard it could probably be heard across the city. What did you want to say? Derek took a deep breath. I prepared a speech, he admitted. It's in my pocket. 3 pages, revised 5 times, approved by the legal department because I wanted to make sure there were no contractual ambiguities. You had legal review a romantic speech? I wanted to be sure. Derek, that's ridiculous, I know. I was going to say adorable. Really? In a very strange way, yes. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket, pulled out a folded paper, looked at it, then looked at Zoe. I'm not going to read it, he said. No. He put the paper away. Because every time I'm with you, everything I plan stops making sense. You mess up my plans. You disorganize my spreadsheets. You make me want to throw all the manuals out the window. Is that good? It's terrifying. He took a step closer. And wonderful. And I've never felt anything like it. Zoe was having trouble breathing. Derek? Let me finish, please. She nodded. I spent my whole life thinking that connection was weakness. That it was safer to stay alone. That no one would ever understand the way my mind works. He swallowed. And then you showed up, sleeping on my shoulder, drooling on my Italian suit, talking to yourself about failure and hope and all the things I felt but never had the courage to admit. A tear ran down Zoe's face. She didn't even try to wipe it. You showed me that vulnerability isn't weakness, Derek continued. That asking for help isn't failure. That loving someone is the bravest thing a person can do. He reached into his other pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. The world stopped. Derek, Zoe whispered. He tried to kneel, and his jacket got caught on his pants. Ow, he muttered, trying to free himself. Wait, this wasn't supposed to happen like this. Zoe started to laugh. She couldn't help it. Don't laugh, Derek said, still struggling with the fabric. Sorry, it's nerves. I rehearsed this 12 times. 12. And in none of them did the jacket get caught? I wasn't wearing this jacket in the rehearsals. Finally, he managed to kneel. His jacket was wrinkled, his hair messy, his expression a mixture of frustration and determination. It was perfect. Zoe Hartman, he said, opening the box. I don't know how to do this right. I'll probably mess up 1,000 times. I'll forget important dates and work too much and say things that sound like reports when they should sound like poetry. Derek? But I love you. In a way I didn't know I was capable of loving, and I want to spend the rest of my life learning to be better, with you for you. He swallowed. Zoe Hartman, will you? Yes. He stopped. What? Yes. The answer is yes. I didn't even finish asking. You were going to ask if I want to marry you? I was. Then yes. Derek blinked. Just like that, without letting me finish the speech? You already said the important part. Zoe crouched down to his level. The part about loving me, the rest is details. But I rehearsed. Derek? Yes? Shut up and kiss me. He kissed her. It was awkward because he was still kneeling and she was half crouching and neither of them was sure where to put their hands. Zoe lost her balance and almost fell. Derek caught her. They both laughed in the middle of the kiss, and it was perfect. Absolutely, completely, wonderfully perfect. When they finally separated, Zoe was crying and laughing at the same time. Are you okay? Derek asked. I'm great. She looked at the ring, a simple diamond, elegant, exactly her style. You chose this by yourself, with some consultation from Denise. You asked Denise for help? She said if I chose alone, I'd probably buy something that looks like a spreadsheet. Zoe laughed. She's not wrong. Derek put the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly. You figured out my size? Zoe asked. I may have measured your finger while you were sleeping. That's creepy. I prefer the term strategic. You're impossible. You're going to marry me anyway. I am. She looked at the ring on her own finger, then at him. I'm going to marry you. They stood up, hands intertwined, under the lights of Philadelphia. You know, Zoe said, when I fell asleep on your shoulder on that plane, I thought it was the worst moment of my life. And now? Now I think it was the best accident that ever happened to me. Derek smiled. Me too. They stood there, in the square where everything had started to make sense. Two disasters who had somehow found each other and decided to be disasters together. And while the lights of Philadelphia shone around them, Zoe whispered to herself, from a lifetime's habit, You did it, Zoe. You finally did it. Derek heard. I know, he said. I always knew you would. And for the first time, she didn't need to convince herself of anything, because she finally belonged to someone, and to herself. What did you think of the story of Zoe? A clumsy girl who fell asleep on the shoulder of a complete stranger during a flight and woke up drooling on the suit of Derek Callahan, the most serious and intimidating billionaire CEO in Philadelphia, a man who barely smiled, didn't understand emotions, and thought spreadsheets were more comfortable than people.
Join the conversation. Your comments and engagement are part of the healing process. Let us know your thoughts below. If this journey of resilience and turning pain into power resonated with your heart, please support Healing Stories. Subscribe. Help us build a sanctuary of strength by subscribing to the channel. Share the hope. Give this video a like and share it with someone who needs to hear this message of recovery and justice. Your support allows us to continue sharing powerful narratives of overcoming trauma and finding peace. Subscribe to Healing Stories and be part of the change.